The FBI is now involved in the search for Sudiksha Konanki, the missing 20-year-old college student who vanished on spring break in the Dominican Republic. It's been more than a week now since she was last seen. From the clothes that were found to the person of interest in this case, we'll tell you the 5 key pieces of evidence we believe investigators are looking at as they try to piece together this puzzle. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Nothing has been ruled out at this point in the search for missing college student Sudiksha Konanki in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. We know that Dominican authorities are leading this investigation, but U.S. law enforcement is involved as well, including the FBI. Let's take a look at some of the evidence that we know at this point. Perhaps the biggest piece of evidence is this surveillance video, which was first obtained by Dominican TV network Noticias SIN. It shows Konanki with friends going to the beach at 4:15 in the morning on Thursday, March 6th. She wouldn't be seen again after she left the view of cameras. There were no cameras aimed at the beach itself. In the video are her friends and that man with his arm around her. That person now considered a person of interest by investigators in this missing persons case. We'll talk more about him in just a minute. The video shows Konanki's friends returning to the hotel at 5:55 in the morning, leaving her and that person of interest behind. It's unclear what the entire group did during that roughly hour and a half they were at the beach and what they saw Sudiksha doing as they left the beach to head back to the hotel and what they told her. The next part of the video brings us to our person of interest. His name, identified by the Loudoun County, Virginia Sheriff's Office, is Josh Reeby. Here he is returning to the hotel by himself later that morning at 9:55 a.m. He is the last person to see Sudiksha. He was with her on the beach alone. Now that term, person of interest, that was put out by the Loudoun County, Virginia Sheriff's Office, which is right outside Washington, D.C. This is where Sudiksha's family lives. They're assisting in this investigation. Now, while the term person of interest may perk your ears up a bit, may have you thinking that this case could be more than just a missing persons search, we can't be more clear that this is not a criminal case. It is a missing persons investigation, and Reeby is not a suspect. No charges have been filed, and to this point, we have not seen evidence that suggests foul play, though nothing has been ruled out. We do know that Reeby has been interviewed extensively, and it is believed that he is still in the Dominican Republic as this search continues. What we know about Josh Reeby, he's a native of a small town in Iowa and a student at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. It's unclear what he told investigators, but Reeby has reportedly said that he and Sudiksha stayed behind to go for a swim. He then threw up and passed out on a beach chair. ABC News reported that investigators in the Dominican Republic think that Sudiksha was swept away by a wave and drowned, and this investigation is being looked at as an accident. But local Dominican media has also said that police have raised questions about what Reeby told them in his accounts of the final moments. ABC News reported that investigators in the Dominican Republic think that Sudiksha was swept away by a wave and drowned. But local Dominican media have said that police have raised questions about Reeby's accounts of the final moments that he saw Sudiksha. It's unclear if he saw her in the water, how deep that water was, or that she was on the shore. As the sheriff in Virginia made Reeby's name public this week, and now if you search person of interest on an internet search engine, his name comes up, his family back in Iowa is standing by his side and pushing back on any speculation that he might have had something to do with Sudiksha's disappearance. His aunt told the Daily Mail that Reeby, quote, wouldn't hurt a fly. A Reeby neighbor in Iowa told the Daily Mail, quote, I bet my life on it, Josh did not hurt that girl. That neighbor also said, quote, if he was drunk, as I've read, that was not the smartest thing to do, but he's in college on spring break. There is no way he would have hurt the girl. As police have interviewed Reeby as well as Sudiksha's friends, they have continued to search the beach where she was last seen. Here's video of some of the helicopters that have been flying overhead of the Punta Cana beach in hopes of finding clues. And one clue that we do know that search crews were able to find was Sudiksha's clothes on a beach chair. It's been reported that there was no sign of foul play or violence related to where those clothes were located. What was not found with those clothes was Sudiksha's cell phone or her wallet. Now, those were apparently taken by Sudiksha's friends who were last seen heading back to the hotel just before 6 o'clock in the morning. We know that Sudiksha traveled to the Dominican Republic with a group of friends for spring break. Sudiksha's dad, who's now in the DR to help with this search for his daughter, told DC media outlet WTOP that he finds it somewhat odd that his daughter would give up her phone since she always has it on her. Investigators have also questioned the friends seen on video heading back to the hotel, leaving Sudiksha behind with Rebbie. It is unclear what they told investigators, but they have not been named persons of interest in this search like Rebbie has. The final element to this story that we want to bring up has to do with the hotel itself. The name of the resort that Sudiksha and her friends traveled to is the Rio Republica. This is the kind of hotel that thrives on spring break, students offering budget vacation packages that promise all you can drink and eat during your stay with access to the beach. The front page of the Rio website, the company operates hotels across the world, has a deal for Punta Cana right now for around $90 a night. That includes 24-hour access to alcohol and food. It's unclear whether Konanki and friends were warned about going to the beach in darkness, especially after at least Rebbie was intoxicated. It's unclear at this point if Konanki was intoxicated and to what level. But this beach in Punta Cana is known to be dangerous. Earlier this year in January, 3 tourists drowned and 1 was missing, according to the media outlet Dominican Today. The group was from Europe and they were staying at that same resort that Konanki would travel to with her friends for spring break. Another storyline related to the resort is the week that Konanki went missing, there was a power outage.
Yesterday, I got back from the worst all-inclusive experience I've ever had.
TikTok user Mel the Stallion 6 posted this nearly 6-minute video saying that her stay at the resort was a, quote, horror story. Now, this post now has more than 860 comments on TikTok. She says that she arrived at the hotel on March 3rd. That is 3 days before Konanki went missing on the 6th. She said the hotel was overcrowded, and that was just one of the issues. The power also went out.
The power went off around 3 a.m., but only for around 10 minutes, so we thought it would be an isolated event. The next morning, we woke up to no running water, but eventually it did come back on. Later that night around 1 a.m., the power went out again. Leaving us with nothing to do, we decided to go night swimming again. Night swimming was fine, but when it was time for us to leave, we discovered that my friend's purse was stolen, which included her wallet and our room key.
When she says she went night swimming, it is unclear whether she meant in a pool or in the ocean like Konanki did with her friends before she went missing. The hotel did release a statement in response to the concerns about that power outage and whether it had any impact on Sudiksha's disappearance. It reads that the power outage happened prior to her disappearance and that the power was back on at the time she went missing. The statement also reads, quote, Rio staff acted appropriately upon being notified of the disappearance, fulfilling their duty to inform the authorities, with whom, as expected, cooperation has been absolute. Rio is also fully committed to offering any support that the young woman's family may require during these difficult days. Everyone at Rio shares their pain, and our thoughts and prayers are with Sudiksha C. Konanki and her family, end quote. At the time of this recording, there are no signs of foul play or charges filed, but Konanki's dad has called for investigators to expand their search to include the possibility of kidnapping or abduction, but there's been no proof to this point reported that supports those theories. Joining me now to talk more about the search for this missing girl is Bobby Chacon, retired FBI agent, also a former underwater search and recovery team lead for the FBI for 19 years. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. A great person to talk to as this story is getting so much attention. We know that the Dominican authorities are leading this investigation, but the FBI is also involved. What role is the FBI playing in this?
Well, it's probably our liaison to the Caribbean. So the FBI has offices all around the world, including in the Bahamas and neighboring countries that can offer assistance. The FBI's role here is to basically assist in any way possible. So we bring everything you can think of to bear that the FBI has at its disposal. So if they need investigators, if they need polygraph examiners, if they need, a dive team, if they need, anything else that you can think of that the FBI does domestically, we can offer that assistance to the authorities in the Dominican Republic because of the relationship that we have with them.
For you, as someone who's investigated many cases over your career, what sticks out to you at this point? As it is still a missing persons case, there's a person of interest. It's not a criminal investigation, but what sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, obviously the similarities to past cases we had, like the Natalie Holloway case in
Yeah.
Aruba, stick out. What sticks out about this particular case, though, is that there is a lack of any kind of physical evidence on the beach, and so, I think authorities are taking the right approach in kind of giving equal merit to both the possibility of foul play and the possibility that this was a drowning. And so they're doing both of those things at the same time, which I think is a good tack to take. I think that's the way you have to approach this right now. But what sticks out to me is there's no blood, there's no broken chairs, there's nothing there to indicate there was any kind of struggle on that beach that night.
Now that this person who she was last seen with, who was also a college student from Iowa, staying at this resort, the Loudoun County, Virginia sheriff has called him a person of interest, not a suspect, but a person of interest in a missing persons investigation, not a criminal investigation. How should people perceive that title? Because I do think when you see person of interest, the public will look and say, wait a second, maybe there's something more here than just someone who drowned.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the Loudoun County's involvement to this point, and there's no crime in Loudoun County. That there's no actually reason for them to be making those kind of statements. I think from what I heard, they backed off that one a little bit because that does bring with it the connotation of suspect. But even if you try to say he's a person of interest, but he's not a suspect, people will automatically think he's a suspect.
Right.
But think of it this way: a person of interest could be a witness. If you have, if you had a video and you didn't have the person's identification, you go, oh, this person is a potential witness. He's a person of interest. He has an interest. We have an interest in talking to him. And so right now, I think the title of person of interest to that individual really needs to go away. He's right now a witness until he's proven otherwise. And like I don't know, I'm not familiar with the Dominican Republic system of laws, but in our country, we have the presumption of innocence. So no one should be labeled a suspect or certainly a defendant until, you have some kind of evidence that would indicate they're involved in a crime. And, in this case, there is none other than the fact that he was the last person seen with her. But his story or his explanation has merit, and there's no reason to believe he's lying about that. I'm sure the FBI has sent leads probably back to his hometown and his school in Iowa to interview friends and family and things like that to see what kind of person he is, what kind of history he has. But there's no reason at this point to disbelieve anything he said. And his story, his version of events is supported by, the very little physical evidence that we have. Again, there's no evidence of foul play on the beach. Her sarong, I think, was found on a neighboring lounge chair where he was claimed to be sleeping. He was drunk that night. He admits it. They all were probably drinking pretty heavily on spring break, and they got into the water and it was dark, and if a rogue wave came and knocked them down, and he was too drunk to provide assistance, he crawled out of the water. He threw up. He passed out in the lounge chair. He wakes up and she's gone. There's nothing to indicate that didn't happen. And so until that point, he, in my mind, and I think should be labeled as just a witness in this case, and that's what he is, and that's the way he should be treated.
Yeah, because and I know we've said in our reporting, like the source of this comes from the sheriff's office where her family lives outside Washington, D.C., but the FBI hasn't said it. Dominican authorities haven't said it. One challenge has been a lot of the reporting has come through media outlets of Dominican sources talking to me, and you're trying to piece together what you're hearing. From an investigative standpoint, when you have so many different agencies involved and everybody's trying to help, how do you navigate that, where certainly you have an agency that's the lead, but then also I think of the resources of the FBI that are available, and then you might have a small sheriff's office locally talking about the case. How do you navigate all of that when you're part of the investigation trying to figure out what's going on?
Well, as an investigator, I would hope and I would ask that my supervisors and my chain of command up above me kind of focus on that. And I can tell them, can you do this or do that while I look at the investigation? Can you handle the media and the public relations end of it? We have, public information officers and specialists that do that kind of stuff. And, why Loudoun County sent actually detectives to the Dominican Republic, I have no idea. Their services, the Dominicans have enough help right now. And so you do have this kind of reporting that's kind of getting people, spun up, and it's unfortunate because that doesn't need to happen right now. As an investigator, I always wanted to have, as little as possible being let out from my investigation, because all of that kind of spurs rumors, spurs conspiracy, spurs all these other things. Before I can run down a piece of evidence or a rumor or a lead, if that lead gets out without me running it down and actually saying, you know what, it kind of looked like something, but we figured out it was nothing. But if it gets out while it could be something, then people run with it on the internet, and you get all these conspiracy theories, and you get people, and it's bothersome for the family, and sometimes it's troublesome for the investigation.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, the headline will be person of interest, and we can give the disclaimer of, not a suspect, this and that. But yeah, people take a run with it, and that's just kind of the world that we live in. From the search standpoint, because you were in many ways the lead diver for the FBI for almost 2 decades. And this is a search that we've seen helicopters above the water. We've seen divers go in the water searching for any sort of clues. How do you approach that part of it, knowing that you're dealing with an ocean that can be very powerful? Reportedly, the waves were powerful that night that she went swimming. How do you approach that search?
Well, first of all, I think, I wouldn't put divers in the water right now. I think it's too soon. You don't have enough of an idea of a finite search area. So I always like to narrow my search area as possible as I could, because anytime you put divers in the water, you're kind of putting them in harm's way. And there's no sense of putting divers in harm's way if you don't have a definitive idea of the finite search area. And that any kind of ocean search, and particularly one in the surf zone. And the surf zone, I mean, is where these waves come crashing down and pull sand in and pull sand out over and over again. Things move there all the time. I mean, if you've ever gone to the beach and put your foot in the sand and let the water just wash over it, in just a few seconds and a few waves, your foot is buried in sand. And so you have to realize that's happening all day long, all night long. And so things move around in the ocean. So they're doing it right by using the air, using drones, using helicopters. If you've seen that water, it's crystal clear. And so you can see a lot under that water without actually going in it. And so now I think what they need to do is expand outward, on the beaches further and further away from the resort, to see if her body washes in or got caught up on something. Because that's the only thing that's going to aid in finding her now, if she's in the water, is if her body got caught up on something. If she got pulled out to sea, and I don't know the currents. I know you're between the Atlantic Ocean on the north and the Caribbean Sea on the south. And then you've got, they're on the eastern point of the island of the Dominican Republic, and then San Juan and Puerto Rico's over here. So you have this kind of channel there. But if she got pulled out into the ocean, if the body got pulled out into the ocean, if she's in fact in the water, then you're talking about she could be in a lot of different places, very far from where she went into the water. Salt water does amazingly destructive things to a human body very quickly. And then you have marine life and predation upon the weakening tissues of the body, and so you start to get that decomposition and consumption of the body fairly quickly. So it's unknown whether or not if she's in that water, how far she is and what condition the body might be in.
And with that, and I know this might be hard to put a number on it, but it has now been a week since she was last seen. And there's been questions of, I know her dad, who you just can't imagine what that family's going through, and searching for hope and holding on to hope that, they can get closure or perhaps a happy ending to this story in some way. But I think her dad raised the question of, well, why hasn't her body washed ashore? It would have washed ashore had it been a drowning. How likely is it that a body, after someone gets pulled out to the ocean, might actually wind up on shore? I know you've searched through in your career, lakes and the ocean. And I just think of just those waves and how disruptive a rip current can be if that's what happened. Just in your experience, how likely is it that a body would actually just show up on shore again?
Well, it does happen, and it could happen. But the fact that it didn't is not a definitive indication that she's not in the water. I know people will get on there, and people supposedly experts in the water, and they'll say a body does this and a body does that. But let me tell you, every case is different. Every body of water is different. Even the same body of water at different times of the year, things act differently in it. So you can't really make any general assumptions about that. And so I think that you just have to keep searching. The fact that she hasn't washed up, it's maybe a slight indication that she might not be in the water, but it's certainly not. To me, it would not rule it out at all. And I would still spend a lot of resources in looking up and down that beach and looking out from the shoreline out as much as you can before you lose sight from the air. Because as it gets deeper and deeper, and if there's anything that a body can get caught on, a reef, a wreck, whatever, then you might focus your search on that. But other than that, the fact that she hasn't washed ashore or a body hasn't washed ashore, to me, is not a strong indicator that she didn't go in the water.
If you were to cast a radius on what the search area would look like in the water, just in your experience, how large of an area would we be talking a week after if she did go into the water that divers would actually have to look through to try and figure out where she is?
Well, you'd have to look at currents that are predominant in that area, and I would defer to like a local fisherman or people who really know those waters, know the tides, know the currents and stuff like that. And I would say and we've gone as far as like putting a mannequin, a clothed mannequin into the water and watched where it went. And so you can do things like that to kind of, know the general area of where a body might have floated. And so I would defer to a local expert on, what the tides and the currents are and the storm systems that were in the area at the time. And then you can extrapolate that out, maybe you want to go a mile more in this direction than that direction. So it can give you some general intelligence as to where your focus should be, but they should be, I would think at least a mile in each direction from that point, if not more, if so in the direction where somebody tells you generally things float out that way or generally things float out that way. I would search even more in that direction. But certainly at a minimum, you'd probably want to be, a couple thousand yards in each direction, and longer in the direction where you think the currents and the tides might have taken her.
From images I've seen, I know that this resort is still open. People are still going to the beach, and I've seen images where people are, you have people who have been searching the area, but then you also still have tourists, which is kind of an odd combination. In your experience, when you're doing an investigation in a place like that, what is that like, where you have people that are there on vacation, but then also you have this very important job to do in a place where you do want to preserve evidence?
Yeah, for us, we just have to keep focused on our job, and then again, rely on other people. If I was there doing the water thing, I would ask the Dominican Republic to kind of provide police officers to kind of keep any public out of the search area where we're going. It's hard when you have that big a search area. You can't keep it off limits to people or boaters or vacationers and things like that. Nor do you need to, because remember, if the body's in the water and it's moving and you find it, there's not going to be much evidence in that particular area other than where you find the body and other than the body itself as it moves through the water. But the majority of any kind of physical evidence is going to be back at that beach and the area where she entered the water. And so I'm not as concerned with loss of evidence or something like that. If she washes up, you would hope that no one would touch the body and would call the police right away, and you cordon off that area, and then you do your, you do your crime scene search of the body right there, in the sand. If it's found in the water, obviously you take it out of the water. If she's found in the water, you take her out of the water and you hand it over to the appropriate medical examiner or the coroner, and do it like that. But yeah, it's difficult in areas where you have the public intermingling in, what potentially is a crime scene. But I think, like I said, the crime scene is going to be confined to that area beach right outside the resort where the one witness says that they were together and then they both went into the water and when he came out of the water. Remember, in this area, I think in January of this year, you had 4 tourists get taken by a rogue wave, and they were found. But it's not uncommon. So I mean, these resorts and at least the people that live there and work there kind of know this area, and that these things do happen there.
With the FBI investigating, you're obviously dealing with, I know she was a permanent U.S. resident. The others involved is certainly a person of interest. He's an American citizen. And again, this is still a missing persons case, but would this be a case that only Dominican laws apply to because it happened in the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, I think pretty much. I mean, there are certain laws the U.S. has passed in the last few years where if an American citizen is harmed overseas through like a terrorist event, we can charge people back here in the United States. We have what's called venue, but for a general crime like this, allegedly, if it's a crime, it would be handled by the Dominican Republic system of justice, their court systems. That's and that's why we are not a lead agency. The FBI is there simply to provide assistance in any way we can to help them. Because it is an American citizen, we are comfortable dedicating our U.S. resources to this case because the victim is an American. But as far as the crime itself, it would be handled by the local criminal justice system there, because it's not, I don't think it's covered by one of the laws that we've previously passed in the last few years, nor, those laws are always subject to the treaties you have with foreign nations, because they're a sovereign country. So, they don't have to abide by anything that, we see. We could pass a law that says you can be tried in this country for a crime committed overseas, but that crime would still be the main responsibility of the host country, and they would have every right to, seek, criminal prosecution against that person and put them in their own jails or whatever. But usually we have treaties with these countries that everybody agrees to. If this is what happens, then this is the avenue and the mechanism that will be dealt with. But in this particular case, since I don't think it's covered by one of those more recent terrorism laws that's been passed, I think the case would lay in the Dominican Republic.
And then just lastly, if now we're at more than a week, if she is not recovered, if there's no evidence of a crime that comes forward, there's just no true developments in what people have uncovered as the search continues. How long could this go for until the authorities kind of reach that conclusion again that maybe they thought about as it happened, that it was a drowning, and that's just the conclusion that they've come to?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the worst case scenario here. Is the unfortunate part is if our body got out to sea and it's never found, obviously then the family never knows, and then those lingering questions will always exist. But and you won't ever have enough for criminal prosecution, and you won't really ever know if definitively if she actually drowned and stuff. So at some point, you hope for the family's sake that in one way or another, I mean, the tragedy will always remain, but in one way or another, if she's found, you get to those answers. Because other than that, otherwise, with the rumors of human trafficking and all these other things, the family is going to have those lingering questions, those lingering doubts. And, so I think that the authorities in those cases, because that's the situation, you try to do everything you can, and you try to throw all the resources you can at it and show the family that you're doing everything you can and to their satisfaction. And then at some point, you have to go, okay, we're going to put this what we call pending and active, where there's no more activity to take on it, but it's not closed. It's going to be pending another lead that develops, pending another witness that comes forward, pending something else that washes up on the shoreline, whatever that thing is that can, reinvigorate the investigation. But it's placed, after a while, it's placed in a pending inactive status, just because there's nothing more to do in the case. You've interviewed all the witnesses, you've searched every place you could possibly search, and then at some point you have to say, okay, we've done all we can. Now we just have to kind of place it into this, inactive status.
Yeah, and it's that certainly would be the worst case scenario, and we'll continue to follow the story in hopes that is not what actually happens. But the search continues in the Dominican Republic. Bobby Chacon, retired FBI agent, thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thanks, Chris.
This is a story that has a lot of interest. We will continue to follow it. For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.